Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Maple Grove Scripture Reading Podcast. So last episode, we watched Elihu turn from Job and address the wise men in the room directly. He laid out Job's position carefully and accurately, saying that Job said, "I am innocent. God has denied me justice. There's no profit in trying to please him." Then Elihu's objection is, you've arrived at the same conclusions the wicked arrive at, and that's the problem no matter how you got there. And now he makes his argument. He's going to tell us why God cannot do wrong. So let me read through the passage. We're going to be in Job 34, verses 10 through 20. So listen to me, you men of understanding. Far be it from God to do evil, from the Almighty to do wrong. He repays everyone for what they have done. He brings on them what their conduct deserves. It is unthinkable that God would do wrong, that the Almighty would pervert justice. Who appointed him over the earth? Who put him in charge of the whole world? If it were his intention and he withdrew his spirit and breath, all humanity would perish together, and mankind would return to the dust. If you have understanding, hear this. Listen to what I say. Can someone who hates justice govern? Will you condemn the just and mighty one? Is he not the one who says to kings, you are worthless, and to nobles, you are wicked, who shows no partiality to princes and does not favor the rich over the poor, for they are all the work of his hands? They die in an instant, in the middle of the night. The people are shaken, and they pass away. The mighty are removed without human hand. So the Hebrew word that Elihu uses in verse 10 for far be it from God is an expression of something almost visceral, something close to horror. The idea is don't even entertain it. The possibility that God would do wrong or pervert justice is not a neutral proposition to be carefully weighed. It's profane. It shouldn't even be in the room. Elihu's not being gentle here. He's establishing the non-negotiable. Before he even argues his case, he names the ground on which everything else stands. God does not do evil. And then he gives reasons. In verse 11, he says he repays everyone for what they have done. He brings on them what their conduct deserves. This is the basic premise of moral order. If God exists and governs, then there must be some correspondence between how people live and what happens to them. That correspondence doesn't have to be immediate or simple or visible in every case, but it has to be real. If there's no connection at all between how you live and what you receive, then the universe isn't morally ordered, and God either doesn't govern it or doesn't care. So Elihu takes this as axiomatic. Of course, God pays people according to their works. He is the one who set up the moral order to begin with. This is also where Elihu and the three friends are on similar ground. They all agree that God is just and that conduct matters. Where they differ is in the application. The friends said, since God is just, Job's suffering proves Job's guilt. Elihu is saying something a little more careful. He's arguing for the principle without forcing it to produce the specific conclusion the friends drew. He believes God is just. He does not say he knows exactly why Job is suffering. He's separating the principle from their misapplication of it. He continues, who appointed him over the earth? Who put him in charge of the whole world? Nobody. The answer is nobody. God didn't receive his authority over creation from anyone else. He's not a delegated ruler. He's not a governor who answers to a higher power. He is the source. He made the earth. It's his. He arranged everything. It runs by his word. He didn't inherit the job. He originated the thing. And this matters for Elihu's argument because it means that God cannot be corrupted by obligation. When a human judge takes a bribe, he does so because there's something he wants from the person above him, or because he fears losing something. Well, God has no such motive. There's no one above him whose favor he needs to curry. There's no advantage he could gain by cheating one person to benefit another. He owns everything. He made everything. The idea that he would pervert justice to please someone doesn't even have a coherent shape. Please whom? For what? Job had accused God of behaving like an unjust judge. Elihu's point is that the metaphor doesn't work. An unjust judge is unjust because there's pressure on him from outside. Well, God has no outside. Then Elihu makes a move that shifts the whole register. If it were his intention, and he withdrew his spirit and breath, all humanity would perish together, and mankind would return to the dust. He's not threatening, he's making a point about dependence. Every human being alive right now exists because God has not withdrawn what he gave. The spirit and breath in us came from him at the start, and they continue because he holds them in place. We don't sustain ourselves. We're not self-generating. The moment God stopped actively upholding us, we'd be back to dust. This is significant in the context of Job's complaint. Job had accused God of being unjust, of treating him worse than he deserved, of being an enemy rather than a protector. Elihu's response isn't to argue about whether Job's suffering was deserved. It's to step back further and ask, Job, do you understand what God is holding in place for you right now while you argue? The fact that you're still breathing is not a given. Every moment of continued existence is an extension of something God did not have to do. So again, it's not a threat, but it's a reorientation. Before you file your complaint about how God is treating you, consider the baseline. He's actively maintaining your existence. You're not arguing from a position of inherent rights. You're arguing from a position of complete dependence on the one you're arguing with. Commentator points out that the argument is from absolute sovereignty. God hasn't treated Job unfairly if he's taken away what he gave. He's not in debt to Job to begin with. That's hard to read. Job had cried out about his rights, but the whole framework of rights is a gift, not a foundation. And Elihu is pushing on that. And then Elihu turns to God's governance and his refusal to play favorites. Can someone who hates justice govern? Will you condemn the just and mighty one? So he's making an appeal to what everyone in the room already knows to be true. The universe doesn't look like it's run by someone who hates justice. The sun rises on schedule. The seasons turn. Crops grow according to the logic of seed and soil. Death comes without partiality for the wealthy or the noble. Whatever complications exist, the basic structures of creation are not chaotic. They're ordered. And ordered things don't suggest a governor who despises order. And then Elihu sharpens it. Who says to kings, you are worthless, and to nobles, you are wicked, who shows no partiality to princes, and does not favor the rich over the poor, for they are all the work of his hands. Human judges show partiality. Human systems may tend to bend toward power and wealth. If you have enough money or enough influence, the scales tip in your direction. That's just how human governance seems to work, and everybody knows it. God does not work that way. Kings die, nobles fall. The rich don't receive preferential treatment from the one who made them. He regards them all as his creatures, nothing more. They have no claim on him that the poor don't also have. This is an argument for God's trustworthiness as a judge, not just his power. Elihu wants to say, even if you don't like the verdicts, you can trust the judge is not corrupt. He doesn't take payment. He can't be pressured. Prince and peasant go to the same grave at the same hour. The last verse in this section lands with a kind of a blunt force. They die in an instant in the middle of the night. The people are shaken and they pass away. The mighty are removed without human hand. It's sudden. It's not gradual. Without warning, in the middle of the night. and not by human agency. God doesn't need an army or a disease or a court to remove the powerful. He just removes them without hand. It's an image of clean, effortless sovereignty. The mightiest rulers in the world are taken out instantly when he decides. There's no negotiation and no delay, no one to bribe or appeal to. And it's not cruelty. It's a demonstration of what Elihu has been arguing the whole time. This God is not under anyone else's authority. He cannot be pressured, bribed, or played for favor. He acts according to what is right, not according to what powerful people want. And here's the honest tension in this section. Elihu is right about the principle. God is just. God cannot do wrong. God is not a corrupted judge. These are things the book of Job does not ultimately dispute. When God speaks from the whirlwind in chapters 38 through 42, he doesn't say Elihu was wrong about his character. He doesn't say, I actually do pervert justice. So the principle stands. But there is a gap in Elihu's argument. He's established that God is just and sovereign and impartial, but he hasn't explained what that means for Job. He said, trust the judge, but he hasn't said, here's what the judge is doing in this specific case. Job's question wasn't really, is God theoretically just? Because he already knew that. His question was, then what is this? If you're just, what is happening to me? And Elihu hasn't really answered that. He's restated the principle, and he's calling it an answer. It's not quite the same thing. But the principle is true. And sometimes you need to hear the principle stated plainly before you can work through what's happening. You start with what you know, even when what you're experiencing doesn't yet fit. You go back to the thing you're sure of. God cannot do wrong. So start there, even when everything else is confusing, especially then. All right, next time Elihu's going to move from God's character to God's knowledge. He sees everything, he misses nothing, and that has consequences for the wicked and the righteous alike. Hope you have a great day, and we'll talk again soon. God bless.